Hello, everyone. Thanks for showing up online or in person. My name is Jude Yew. I'm a UX researcher at Google. I'm going to be talking about our team's adoption of AI. I will add a caveat. I did not manage to get our data run through legal, so I'm going to use the Stack Overflow data as a corollary and then talk about what we are experiencing as well. And it's very similar. The other thing I would add is that if you asked me 3 to 5 years ago that I would be an AI person, I would say no, but here we are, right? So let me start with a little bit of an intro, right? So this is my journey, and the path does not run straight, right? Like for most people, I was a theater person. I taught theater for 10 years. I have a diploma in education. I was a career teacher. I like to say I've taught all the way from elementary 1 to postdocs, and I literally have had students across that range. Somewhere in there, I decided to do a PhD in the University of Michigan at the School of Information. My dissertation focused on social computing. Along the way, I also did a user experience internship in Yahoo Research. My former manager is sitting over there, Ayman. And that internship was indispensable. It got me started in exploring machine learning and working in a corporate environment. I was an academic through and through. After graduating, I took a job as a faculty member at the National University of Singapore in 2012, and I left in 2018 for Google as a user experience researcher. So this is where I am right now. Happy to answer questions about the background, etc. It's fairly international, fairly non-linear, right? And spans across, academia, industry, arts and humanities, as well as science. This is the outline for my talk. I'm going to talk about in 4 chapters or 4 sections, so to speak. I'm going to talk about my specific trench. It's, as the title suggests, it's a view from the trenches, and I'll talk about my trench. My trench is not like your trench. Different trenches have different contexts, but this is my trench, and I'll introduce that. I'll also, that will seg into talking about AI adoption and productivity, its expectations, measuring it. I have a colleague here, Noah, who is in the trenches with me, right? And we're doing that right now. And then I'll seg a little to talking about AI and human cognition and starting to talk about design and UX. And then I'll end off with a quick conclusion, moving beyond fast AI, the role of UX in design. So my specific trench, I work on a team called Fuchsia. On Fuchsia, we're trying to build the next generation operating system. We're actually public out there already. We're on the kitchen displays, those smart displays, right? And the goal is to have a general purpose operating system. Our VP likes to say that we're going to serve from doorknobs to data centers, right? But specifically within this team, it's an operating system team. As you saw from my background, nothing in my background suggests that I'm an operating system person. But I manage a team of UX researchers, but we also have designers, engineers, and tech writers. And our goal here is to empower developers to make computing inclusive, accessible, secure, sustainable, and also have excellent developer experiences. So a lot of you may be familiar with the field of UX, right? That we're in Beihai and we're in the Bay Area. But I would say that my team operates in the field of DX, or developer experiences. And one crucial distinction between UX and DX is that We're not dealing with the end users. We're dealing with the people who make the software, the applications, the platforms that eventually go to the end users. So we serve specifically the software engineers, the developers, and we liken them to expert users. It would be similar to people working in medicine, catering in the UX field, catering to doctors, very specific, very specialized, and there are some similarities between them. I kind of touched on this already. Traditional UX often focuses on consumer experiences at the on-device layer. What you see here is a layer stack from hardware to the user experiences. The UX tends to focus on the top layer. Traditional DX often focuses on product experiences. As I said earlier, the engineers and the software developers developing those products for you. But our team, because we're working on an operating systems team, we're one level deeper. We focus on building the layers closest to the hardware. So we're focused on things like the kernel, system services, drivers, file systems, and things like that. And our team is specifically focused on excellent developer experiences in that layer for the developers of that layer. So the developers would be involved in the typical developer workflow where you have coding, testing, debugging, checking code in, deploying code, or implementing code. And we serve those developers through several surfaces. This is not comprehensive, but surfaces like documentation, tooling, as Ted suggested earlier. We looked at code libraries, APIs, and SDKs. So that's a fairly broad remit, but also an interesting area because it's a unique time to be in this position. One of the things about working on this team is that we have no one monolithic developer, right? As I've indicated, we serve developers working in the kernel, all the way up to folks working at the drivers. And those two are very different sets of engineers, requiring different workflows, different tools, different processes. And that's my pitch to you for why you should kind of listen to me a little, because from our vantage point, we are in a position where we have been trying to roll out AI to our developers, and our team, the Future Experience Design team, is looking at how do we make those AI experiences for these developers excellent through tools, workflows, documentation, etc. I'll pause for a second. Any questions about the team, background? No? So, as I've suggested, we are in the midst of a lot of change, and we are rolling out AI across the company and across the team. And along the way, I'm sure in the press and in mainstream media, you've heard all sorts of things about AI, and in particular, AI and work, right? It's going to change the way we work. It's going to make roles obsolete, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want to talk today a little bit about some of the expectations around rolling out AI in a software development team, one of which is what I call fast AI expectations. And I'll delve a little bit deeply into that in a moment. So we're in the midst of change. We're trying to roll out AI with our software developers. My team is specifically focused on understanding and improving developer productivity and measuring it, right? But I'll start this narrative maybe just a little broader and maybe back up a bit. There is an AI adoption push across companies, right? One would say across the country and even internationally. AI adoption has been a buzzword in many corporations, but how do we gauge if AI has been successful and it has helped the developers become more productive or we can write better code? And one of the things that has emerged is that we have been given the mandate to understand how productivity has increased with AI, but we don't have the right tools to measure it right now. And one of the things that we have right now is using AI tokens. But if you know what AI tokens are and its usage, it's not a great measure of how AI is being used by the developers. And I will illustrate with some examples from the Stack Overflow developer survey. This was the Stack Overflow developer survey in 2025. Obviously, it's been a year, things have changed. But we just wrapped up a survey on our team as well, and we've rolled that out this week. In fact, today we had a dry run report, and we see some similar things, right? So there's a push for AI adoption, and that's the narrative that you get in the media, that's the narrative we get from management, that's the narrative we get from corporations. But if we look at on the ground from the Stack Overflow developer survey, you can see that developers are using AI, right? They use it daily. 47.1% of individuals use it daily. On our team, we're seeing similar results, as I said, from a survey that we rolled out today, where the team, up to 89% of respondents report that Gen AI plays a critical role in our work tasks. And similar numbers on its positive impact on the developer productivity. Additionally, oh, yes.
Yeah, so I was at this HAI talk a couple weeks ago. We'll keep that in. Where this researcher that studies these things had done this study that showed that, you know, expert programmers' productivity was reduced by 20% when they used AI. I don't know, you're probably aware of this paper. It's a year old now, maybe, but it's it's an interesting question: is how do you use it, and how do you use it in a way that's going to be productive, and how do you know whether it's being productive?
Yep. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into that. But like all relationships, it's complicated. So the narrative is a push for AI adoption, but we see developers responding that say they're using it already, right? But what do they use it for? And the Stack Overflow survey gives us an insight into some of the uses of what developers are using AI for. If you look at the top 3 roles for AI in the development workflow, the first one is search for answers. The second one, generating content. Not quite clear what that is. The third one is learning new concepts. The first and the third items there track very closely with the survey results that we just had today, which we rolled out on our team with 140 engineers. So likewise, the top 3 uses of AI on our team were searching for answers, learning about a code base, and writing tests, right? Now, you may ask yourself, is this a good use of AI? Is this adoption, right? I would argue no, right? In the diffusion of innovation literature, you have early adopters, you have late adopters, but there's also this notion of a shallow adoption versus a deep adoption, right? And what we're seeing in the Stack Overflow data, and likewise in our data, is shallow adoption. Low stakes tasks such as summarizing text or doing searches or learning about a new concept Frequency may be occasional or reactive. Standalone, you use standalone tool, the impact is marginal productivity gains. That's a more complex story right there. But I would argue that we should be pushing for a deeper adoption of AI, where it's applied to complex, high-value tasks, core tasks, and helping with core decision-making and strategic decision-making even, right? And this would require embedded use across processes. This table is coming from a report about AI adoption from the Behavioral Insights team. My wife works on this team, and I'm familiar with some of the work that she's doing. It is a 95-page report on AI adoption with a lot of literature. I have the link there, happy to share it in other ways as well. It's a pretty good read, worth a gander. But if we would like deeper adoption, what does that take, right? Again, this is coming from the Behavioral Insights team report. It would require, for deeper adoption, a better understanding of motivators, empowering folks with better capabilities and operational readiness, increasing trust and legitimacy of the tools and the technology within their workflows, right? But this is a taller ask, right, than just adoption, right? 2 weeks ago, I was at CHI, the ACM CHI conference in Barcelona, and this was one of the presentations given. I think, Noah, you summarized this presentation, but I'm just going to draw your attention to the image, but this study is on the values of value in AI adoption, rethinking efficiency in UX designers' workplaces. I know that this is talking about UX designers and I'm talking about software developers, but the broader point is still the same. And the image is saying the critical issue is not whether AI enhances productivity, but how it distributes responsibility, reshapes organizational politics, and changes how value is recognized, right? So what this is suggesting is that, if you want a deeper adoption of AI, it requires a deeper consideration, right, of organization, politics, AKA culture of a team and an organization. I will give you one example, and it's called the code review tax, right? So when AI is adopted, ostensibly you can produce more code, but that code results in greater downstream stresses in workflows. And one example of this is that people who do code reviews on teams have more code to review, right? And sometimes that code is not good code. And so you can see some of the comments being given here. The cognitive load has increased exponentially for code reviewers. There's been a sharp increase in the number of AI-assisted changes I need to review. These changes typically require more time than changes written purely by human. The most common pitfall is trusting AI output too much before sending it out for review. So the broader point I want to make about this view from the trenches is that many companies are pushing for AI adoption, but AI adoption is just a fast AI way of thinking. And in order for AI to be adopted well, and you have good AI to work with, a deeper consideration of organization, culture, and in my next section, thinking about the human is required. And one way of thinking about this is with pace layers from Stuart Brand. Who is someone I think many people in this room may be familiar with, right? For the uninitiated, what pace layers are is the suggestion that different things in our world move at different paces. So For example, fashion, it moves fast. It changes by season, let's say. Infrastructure moves more slowly. You don't build a bridge with each season, right? You build a bridge once every 100 years, let's say. Governance is slow to change. Likewise, culture. So if we can extend the thinking of pace layers to organizations rolling out AI and technology and new technology, and this is very much sympathetic to the diffusion of innovations literature, right? So new technology, things like AI, we know the pace of change is fast, right? New models get rolled out sometimes weekly, right? But in order for deeper adoption to happen, consider requiring AI adoption, let me read the bullet point. Requiring AI adoption without accounting for behavioral, cultural, and organization change is fast AI. Good AI perhaps requires moving beyond shallow adoption measures and taking into account changes in behavioral and organizational workflows, for instance. Okay. I'm going to pause for a second in case there are any questions. For the next section, I would like to talk about AI and human cognition, right? And making a pitch here for designing for human psychology and behavior. I'd like to start first with a paper I saw at CHI again 2 weeks ago. The paper is from Carnegie Mellon University, and it's called Code With Me or For Me: How Increasing AI Automation Transforms Developer Workflows, right? This is a study where they compared how a co-pilot style tool compared against agentic, an agentic style tool, which is a coding assistant, and how that affects developer productivity and experience. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, it's back. Just the quick takeaway, firstly, is that different styles of AI tooling, whether it is a co-pilot or whether it is an agent, results in very different workflows. If you look at the image here, the blue bubbles are human input in the developer workflow. I have a HDMI port here.
Let's just try this
Yeah.
one more time. Yeah, that's usually. Let's try that.
So this is a delve into basically how AI is assisting with developer workflows, and you can see a clear difference in that in the agentic workflow, the human input comes in at the beginning and maybe at the end, right, with very little in between. Whereas the co-pilot workflow is a bit more diverse, so to speak, right? One of the outcomes of this paper is that agents clearly assist developers, right, to complete new tasks and reduce effort. However, developers felt that, in particular, the agentic workflow were harder to control and large amounts of code and output harder to parse, right? And the paper went on to give some design suggestions for how to overcome this, right? But my question here for you is, which looks like deeper AI adoption and usage? Both AI, right?
I like the fact that there's interaction.
With Copilot, right? Whereas the agentic workflow maybe hands off, let's say, right? Yes.
How about a hybrid approach?
Again, as I said earlier, like relationships, it's complicated, right? There are many different stripes of developers with many different stripes of workflows, right? And adoption is also requiring them to break habit, sometimes accrued over tens of years, right? So hence my argument earlier for consideration of cultural change. In this section, I'm going to argue for behavioral change as well, right? By considering human cognition, right? And as Ted suggested, the co-pilot workflow looks like it's more interactive, more collaborative, right, between the AI and the developer. But our data suggests, or my experience and observations in our team suggests that, there's more than meets the eye, right? One example is on our team, we just recently rolled out an ability to be able to detect whether a code commit has been generated by AI. That sounds great. That helps us with our measurement job, right? But we dug a little deeper, and essentially, the only time that tag gets put on that code commit is when the AI does the code commit. And not every developer uses AI to do the code commit. Everyone has a different workflow, right? So the situation is a little bit more complex, right? But, the reality from the trenches is that people are adopting AI and adapting to it, right? It's just that it probably takes time. But one of the common complaints, if you will, about AI usage, especially in coding environments, is, you've heard of the term vibe coding, right? And it's a pejorative, actually, right? I mistakenly used it on an engineering colleague the other day and said he vibe coded something, and he took great offense, and I had to apologize profusely. And vibe coding suggests that, you give the AI a couple of prompts, it shoots out something, you may take that, you may commit that, you may use that, right, out of that. There is good evidence to suggest that that there are people who do that, obviously, but that kind of AI usage has negative implications. And I'm going to draw your attention to another paper that I saw 2 weeks ago. And this is a paper from MIT, and it's looking at the personal validation effect in LLMs. Essentially, we've heard of LLM output being sycophantic, right? But it also has a positive bias and reinforces our positive bias. So what this group of researchers did, as the image suggests, is that they conducted an experiment with 238 subjects and used a 10-round investment game where these subjects were exposed to either positive or negative valence predictions from the AI about astrology, about personality sources, etc. Essentially, to cut to the chase, positive valence output from the AI was seen as significantly or perceived as significantly more valid, more personalized, more reliable, more useful compared to negative predictions, right? So what this suggests is that the AI tooling itself has an affordance within it, where it tends to be biased towards the positive, it tends to agree with you more often than not, and it can reinforce this thing. This term is getting some traction right now in the field, and it's a term called cognitive surrender, right? So you give it an input, It goes into the model. It responds with a positive sycophantic validation. The user perceives it as more reliable, more useful, etc. And then that basically results in the uncritical adoption of whatever output that the AI gives. This is not great, obviously, right? And there is a growing, why AI models tend to be biased positively and why they're sycophantic is not well understood. There's been a recent call for a new area of work called machine psychology, basically using traditional psychology methods for humans and applying it to the models, right, to better understand how they're thinking. But this suggests that there's an interaction effect here between the model and its affordance and our cognition. This is classic HCI, right? But is that the reality on the ground, right? Is there a question there?
No.
No, okay. Is that the reality on the ground? And here I am going to point towards the Stack Overflow survey from last year, and then also embellish it with some results that we just rolled out today, right? Are developers vibe coding or cognitively surrendering to output from the AI model? In this survey question, we see the results about AI tool frustrations, right, from developers. And they are, for the most part, 66% of them say AI solutions are almost right. This is their frustration with that, with AI. They need to debug AI-generated code. I don't use AI tools regularly, but I become less confident in my output, or it's hard to understand. This frustration suggests that more human input is required for the next phase of whatever the AI model has produced. Yeah, go ahead, Edwin.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Edwin, and one of the things that is a big part of my history is a framework of understanding cognition called distributed cognition. And this is, and as a fundamental difference from what most theories conceive of as cognition being contained within our heads, distributed cognition posits that all the thinking, all the tasks that we do with our tools, with the other people, with culture, are all cognitive processes. And the effect of that is that trying to study just what's happening in a person's head, just what's happening inside the LLM, that misses the importance of the interdependence. Mm-hmm. It's hard to apply it directly here, but it strikes me as having a critical overlap.
So one, you kind of preempted the next slide, right? Cognitive surrender versus cognitive offloading. Also, I think that there is new literature coming out. There's a study from Wharton that talks about a new form of thinking that has emerged, whether good or bad. So are you all familiar with System 1, System 2 thinking? Right, System 1 is fast thinking. It's Daniel Kahneman's book, right? Fast versus slow thinking. So System 1 thinking is instinctual, it's habitual, right? It's rote, it's things that you develop over years, but it's fast and it's there for a reason. It's things like fight or flight, right? Whereas slow thinking is related to metacognition, symbolic recognition, et cetera, et cetera. But this paper from Wharton is positing that because of AI, there may be a third form of thinking called System 3, right? I don't have time to go into depth here, but people are starting to look into this a lot more. Any other questions? So if I go back to this illustration of developer workflows with AI, one would suggest that the Copilot workflow is more interactive, doesn't involve cognitive surrender, right? But in actuality, the behavioral insights team did this chart where you have a continuum, if you will, right? Where on one end, the end to your left, the AI does more of the work, versus on the other end, in the green columns, where the developer does most of the work. And I would suggest this is the case as well for a lot of people, right? Are there things that, so I'll speak from personal experience and preparing for this presentation, did I cognitively surrender? Yes, I did, right? Especially for some of the imagery and charts I asked Gemini to help me generate, right? But did AI come up with the idea for this talk? Did it come up with the outline? No, right? Did it help me procure examples that I probably wouldn't have thought of before? Yes, I'm using it as a cognitive partner, if you will. And there's increasing evidence that, especially with skills and with agentic workflows where we manage multiple agents instead of just one, right? There's a lot more to and fro involved in that. So the takeaway here is that developers aren't surrendering. Rather, they are becoming verifiers. I like to tell my friends that we're all becoming managers, right? As good or bad as that role sounds, right? But we instead are not managing humans right now. We're managing multiple agents or different models or different workflows in parallel even, right? Let me move forward. So how can we think about design and its role in preventing cognitive surrender and encouraging more of this to and fro and this collaborative approach, if you will? So fast AI is an assumption that adoption is fast, adoption is easy, workflows will be smooth with the adoption of the new technology. It is smooth, but as cognitive surrender shows, it comes with drawbacks, right? It's just like, a life lived without any form of friction may not be a life well lived, right? Likewise, in our work, a work filled with zero friction may not be, productive. It may not be impactful as well. So I would suggest that AI, to the tool argument earlier, right? AI should be an extension of the developer's mind, and then we should think about leveraging friction to keep human critical thinking engaged, and think about more like the Copilot model, right? So I'm going to conclude here, right? And talk about, just summarize a little and talk about the role of UX and design and thinking about moving beyond fast AI, right? And hopefully we get good AI. One, as I've suggested at the top of the talk, accounting for cultural, organizational change. Some of the things we can think about there, invest in change management, something small like that, communicate well, measure what matters. I am on this particular roller coaster, right? And we're still figuring things out, right? So one of the fundamental questions that me and my team are faced with right now, how do we measure AI engagements? We know that just counting tokens isn't it. Just like back in the day, counting CLs or codes committed, lines of code committed from a developer isn't a sign of a developer's productivity. From the cultural perspective or the organizational perspective, move towards deeper workflow integration rather than shallow usage. You can, some of the ways this can happen is you can have AI champions, you can have folks who are perhaps more advanced on the team showcase how they make use of some of these new tools and how it's integrated into their workflows, for example. It's important to account for human behavior and cognition, right? As humans, we are flawed beings. And we have our biases and constraints, right? And as I've suggested in the earlier section, just being agreeable with you doesn't lead to good conclusions all the time, right? So one idea here is we can introduce productive frictions, right? So for example, like ensuring a click or brief wait before getting an AI suggestion, right? Scaffold opportunities for appropriate reliance and cognitive offloading, right? That mentioned earlier that, humans have depended on tools, right? And to a certain extent, it's tools that make us human, right? So likewise, how are we going to use these tools, and how do we cognitive offload some of the things that we perhaps take for granted today? Like for example, how many people here remember a phone number anymore, right? I don't think I can. So we've effectively offloaded that onto our smartphones, right, and other devices. Designing for social technical interactions. Edwin, to your point, this is the very stuff of HCI, right? It is that interaction space. It's the space. It's neither property of the being nor property of the tool or object, right? It is in that interaction, right? So how do we design systems to account for behavioral biases and barriers, right, towards adoption? Can we provide transparency into decision making? So for instance, I work with a set of folks where we're producing analytics, and increasingly we are asked to use AI to produce some of these metrics and numbers and data. And if we're not careful, the AI can hallucinate, the model can hallucinate, and we get wrong numbers and we don't even realize it. So what we're trying to do is we do a couple of things. One is we make sure that the task is always portioned out into phases, and each phase is output into a collaborative notebook that has visibility from other members of the team. The other thing is that we do not let the model touch the raw data at all. It all has to go through tools so that it doesn't change things out. And with that, I'm going to stop here and pause for questions again.
So thank you. There's a lot of literature you brought up. I love learning about other people's work and yours. But I bet you have some examples, and I don't know what you can talk about, but the war stories, things that you thought would work and didn't work, are always how we learn a lot about an area. And yours is a very interesting area of working with these developers. So I don't know if you can give some stories of something that people thought would work and didn't, or did work that you didn't think would work, or something you changed and were surprised by.
I'm going to invoke the "it takes a village." Let me give thanks first, right? There are many people to thank. As I said, it takes a village. So our various study participants for their valuable insights, my wife for the critical feedback and suggestions for this presentation, and also the team of which Noah is here, right? And then another colleague, Angelica, who is not here, who are doing the work alongside myself, right? So Noah, feel free to chime in if you want, right? I think I articulated one kind of story from the trench, which is, we just rolled out a way to identify code commits that were committed by AI, right? And it turned out that it's not useful at all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you have a story you want to tell? We learned from stories.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Jude's example of the token usage is not unique to our scenario, right? But we've heard that quite a bit, that there's a bit of the McNamara fallacy where it's the easiest thing to count, and so it's the first thing that has been counted. I think we're in the midst of renegotiating kind of and making sense of how multifaceted the concept of productivity is and how well it, or not well it maps to these kind of first line things. Other than that, I think because we're in a period of such change in terms of developers trying a bunch of things and seeing what sticks, you know, there's kind of the desire for certainty from a measurement perspective, and in a lot of ways we're just not there yet. So those tensions, you know, organizationally, I think show up in terms of like people wanting numbers about the impact of AI at the same time that this week in no way resembles, you know, a month ago. And so when we try and put programs together and do longitudinal comparisons in terms of what hasn't worked, you know, we've seen such change between February and now, for example, and between November and February. In our team, in terms of how people are using it and what they're using it. And part of that's the model development. There was a real step change with some of the new models being released in terms of developers feeling like they could offload tasks to some of these agents and come up with results that weren't unuseful. And so now there's a lot of you know, taking and running, right? So you're like, okay, we've got one agent that can do something. How do I coordinate a swarm of agents? And again, not unique to our situation, but at the same time, such a fast changing landscape that the kinds of questions that leadership is asking about, like, okay, so are multiple agents making us more productive? Is something we're still trying to parse out.
I have more questions, but that's just it's other people's turn for a bit.
I have two questions. One is, I think you shared you guys serve a wide population of developers, like from hardware, kernel, and many layers. And then you talk about the deep versus shallow integration. I wonder, do you guys have a taxonomy of tasks and workflows to understand in this landscape what are proper for deep versus shallow integration?
So I don't think we've done that yet. I think what we're doing is we're just starting to lay out the taxonomy of what are some of these tasks that the agents can take over, and the person who's doing that, what is it, right next to you.
Yeah, cool. My second question is about measurement. So I think you guys talk about like a productivity, and then there's the usage of token, and then there might be other things, perhaps DORA or something else. But I think from your talk, there seems to be some notion we should care about the skill erosion because cognitive offloading versus cognitive surrendering. So I wonder, maybe there isn't a formal plan yet, but do you have any intuitions? Both of you can speak up. Like what are some hypotheses or assumptions in ideal world, if you have the data, you will be able to measure and using that as a counter metric to say, just do more.
Right. Let me speak for myself first, and then I'll speak about developers, and then I'll let Noah speak, right? For myself, I can cosplay a multitude of things now, right? I can be a software engineer, even. But there is a danger in that, right? Because it doesn't make transparent some of the maybe fundamental skills that I may have kind of leapfrogged over or fly over, right? But I don't think that's the case we're seeing with our developers. As I said right at the beginning of the talk, we're dealing with expert users here. Some of these people have decades of experience, right? Therefore, asking them to change their workflow, it's akin to like prying the gun from their cold dead hands, right? That kind of thing. Oh, the Vim Emacs debate versus, IDEs, oh my God. That happens outside, that happens internally as well, right? So I would say, as I've said earlier, I made the social faux pas suggesting one of my engineering colleagues vibe coded. They take great offense at that, right? So I don't think there's skill erosion there. And in fact, in the data and survey data that I'm suggesting is that they're using it to learn more, figure out more about code base, take on tasks or roles in different layers of the stack where they may not have had experience before. However, there's a caveat, right? What do we do about onboarding new folks, right? And how do they learn if this is the path for software development? Maybe they need to learn new things, right? I think that's an open question right now, and something that I think as a society we have to grapple with, right? Because it deals with learning, education, mentoring, pipelines of engineers. No?
Qualitatively, people have talked about feeling like it's harder after using AI to do things that, they did before. And like Jude said, I think the question is just, with such fundamental changes to the concept of the discipline, will that matter? Like we still don't know necessarily in a longer time frame what's been lost. So kind of more exploration and research needed to understand what impact that will have. But certainly there is, from the developers we work with, a perception of skill erosion.
Okay, so a question from our chat, Michael Worth. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes.
Even before the AI tsunami, as a manager of development teams, I noted, I think I'm doing this double. I have this guy. As a manager of development teams, I noted an order of magnitude difference between individual developer proficiencies. How do your recommendations vary to apply to the whole spectrum of developer capabilities? Are we destined for only the top few percentage of developers being employable?
I don't think so. Because I think that as I'm suggesting with tools, right, that there is a spectrum, right? I think of it as augmenting, right? And people who know how to augment are deeply enmeshed, right, in this to and fro with their models or agents, right? It is the shallow adopters that do the one-shot prompt, get that output, and then that's it, right? So I think, as I've suggested during the talk, I think one way to think about this is deeper engagement, right, with the tools and the models, especially in the workflows of developers. But I've also suggested that the path is not straight. Not every developer is the same. Some people like Emacs, some people like IDEs, right? And how do you incorporate, right, this new tooling into that? And I think we're just at the start of that journey, right? Like not just on our team, but as a society, right? In Singapore, we have a phrase, it's called akan datang, right? It's to be seen, it's coming soon, we'll know soon.
It's kind of following on from your last statement, it's a scenario question, what is the biggest uncertainty for both, also some of the other, that you see in the next 1 to 2 years? I mean, maybe longer term if you like, but And I mean uncertainty in the sense of that if this thing changes, then that's kind of where we end up. If this thing changes that way, that's where we end up. So what is the biggest uncertainty that you see here?
I mean, that is the biggest uncertainty, right? Like, we don't know the downstream effects. So, like, for instance, I talked a little bit about how we're just at the beginning of figuring out which workflows, which user journeys should be AI-fied or not, right? But there are unintended consequences, right? And we don't know what those are yet, right? Until we try it. So that would be the biggest sort of like, it's like playing a video game, right? Where the map is still black, only portions of it are clear, right? And we won't know till we move into that area, then it unveils itself.
Thanks, Jude, for the great talk. I had like two questions. I'm hoping to ask you the more grounded one. And I promise this is not predicated on the closing of Ask Jeeves last week. But the question goes to my head is like, are you thinking about the AI as valets or butlers? So the valet services the individual, the butler services the household. Whenever you have a developer, it's rare the case that you have the sole developer. Sometimes you do, but more often there's an organization or even an outside entity. And if you're the sole developer selling a store in the App Store, then you have another outside entity you're also trying to pay service to. And your examples, they all seem very much like I could change AI with search. I know you're coming from Google, because it's like, oh, we're going to use AI to do this. Search is, we've gone acclimated to extracting a query and going to Google to search for it, then returning to our environment. And you mentioned a lot about the workflows, but those workflows were very developer or individual developer centric. So I'm curious, how much is that going to lead to too many, errant vectors as the individuals are serving their own goals versus the butler style intervention that needs to think about the whole household and what's trying to be developed here. So do you see any of that in your research, or do you see a need for that in the future?
Yeah. This is a consequence of thinking of AI adoption or engagement on the individual basis only, right? There's an organization at stake here, right? There's a work process at stake here. And so I'm arguing that we need a whole house perspective.
But what would it look like? Would it be just a whole array of funnels, or like what would that architecture look like to you?
Right now, I think we're all like, master of puppets, right? That's at least the mental model I have now, that may prove to be incorrect in weeks even, maybe, right? But I do think that we're all going to have to manage a set of agents, right?
I'm feeling a little bit like the pointed-haired manager in Dilbert. I fall quite very much in that sort of enthusiast area, because I've seen things work, and I'm not hearing that from this. So maybe I should try to make it a little finer grain. What areas or what types of development, what kinds of debugging, what kinds of project have you seen the AI tools work for? Where are the success pockets that, maybe they'll be bigger, maybe they'll be smaller next year, but given the tools post-November, post-February, right now, these couple months, what are some...
Your graph.
Which graph?
In your experience?
What people did.
Oh, what people did? Oh. This one? No.
Well, no, debugging networks, doing prototypes. What area are you seeing adoption that's working and that's not like schlop?
Or
none.
We have one success story that we took to Kai in Barcelona last week, but this is coming from the UX team, right? And we've showcased a tool where it allows the engineer to basically root cause a failure in their code in logs. The nature of our platform is that it's still kind of experimental, right? So when it spews out logs, we're talking hundreds of thousands of lines, right? And getting to the particular failure line requires, a significant amount of effort, let's put it this way. And that project, what that has done is that when a failure happens, it captures it, and then it takes the last good run with it, and then it narrows down the sort of the space, right, where the engineer can debug and identify the root cause. But that's not the real kicker. I think the real kicker is plans for the next phase of this tool, which is, I think we're starting work on this, right? Where the failure may be something that the engineer may be not familiar with, right? Maybe the engineer can consult documentation, and that's where AI can help. But I think more importantly, it can also tap chat logs. It can also identify who's the expert in this field, right? The informal, implicit knowledge aspect of this, right? And I think that would be gold, right?
So, okay. More? So we'll get him and then you. But, so I think of Alan Perlis talking about organisms. He says that basically no algorithm exists, only organisms. They have to be changing. They're always broken. They're being fixed. And I'm thinking about how I work as a developer. I'm an experimentalist. I mean, all I do is invent. So I'm always making prototypes. In fact, I was in a meeting last night where people said, oh, we should have a beer and talk about ideas. And I said, no. And I wrote up a couple programs and we showed them around the room and it changed the whole conversation. So I think that this quick prototyping, trying out lots of ideas is what I'm seeing working. And I wonder whether that, maybe all you guys are sitting in your agile meetings and you're just getting your yellow stickies and you just have to do your Jira shit, but maybe there's some more experimental programming going on. And certainly that's what I teach when I'm teaching people to program these days. I just wonder, are people trying out more ideas?
100%. As I said, we're technically a UX team, and we just had an AI sprint, right? Where we had a day, basically, sprint. Where as a UX team, we tried to come up with and vibe code. I'll be honest about that, about myself, right? Applications to problems that we think can be solved, right? And increasingly, as a UX team, we're encouraged to submit CLs or commit code as well. So that's where we're at, right? So
experimental's happening.
Experimental's happening, for sure.
Ideas,
Yeah, more, faster, more, which is not always good, but there's faster, more, for sure.
Communicate.
Yeah.
Right? I have an idea in my head. If I can express it in a way that I can share it with you, that becomes something more tangible for me. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Wanted to note quickly on the positive side, and then I'll get into more of my question. I agree, I think I'm seeing at work, there's a lot more output of, there's more work being done, right? I think that's the net positive. Segueing into my question, and granted, I don't want to be entirely negative, some of it, to your point, is just communication. It's getting these quick prototypes out, but some of it you want to ship, and then you have to review it. And so that's a little more towards the premise of my question. I feel like the bottleneck almost within AI development at the moment is that review process. I feel like everyone's feeling it, whether it's on the research side, whether it's on the developer side with code reviews. You have your teammates, creating code and they're like, can you review this? And okay, it used to be 10 pieces of code. Now it's 30, it's more than it used to be. Or you do something for yourself, maybe as a researcher, you're creating a report based on data, or you're doing analysis, and the AI does a lot for you, but then you need to make sure that it didn't hallucinate at some point in the process. So there are different approaches to checking, I feel, at the moment. Some of what you mentioned, like creating logs, like as it does the analysis, like have an output of logs that you can go and check, whether you're the expert or you have an expert that you can have check it. Another one that I've seen is in the prompt, people will say, like, make sure that you're being, like, really careful and, like, verifying data at every step. Like, make sure you're referencing the right data, like, always do checks, like, things like that within the prompt. I think I've seen that more earlier on in the AI days, and maybe we're kind of, like, shifting towards something a little more rigorous beyond that. And then the other approach is just as you're prompting it, telling it to check, and then double checking within that process. So it's more human in the loop as opposed to just like more autonomous. So I guess my question is, like, we have these solutions now to verify. What do you kind of see coming in the future in terms of that verification process? You know, I think logs is maybe the newer one, at least in my world, but kind of just curious what the development is there.
I think evaluation writ large, right, is an open book right now. Right? And it's evaluation on multiple levels, right? Not just evaluation of the output, evaluation of the prompt, right? There's a field called prompt engineering, and on our team, we're privileged enough to have a UX writer on board, and she's been, diving into this with gusto, right? There's obviously guidance that we can give. There's obviously, better ways to provide the prompts. What's an agent or a skill is essentially a bunch of prompts fed into an MD file, right? That the model will read, right? So how you phrase that prompt is crucially important. So that needs to be evaluated. In the work that I'm focused on currently, there's a bit of statistics involved, right? How do we know that that's getting correct, right? And that's not just output, right? It's like, what's the underlying assumptions that are being made in some of these calculations, right? How do we evaluate that? And then there's the whole model evaluation as well, right? Like, I did not anticipate 2 years ago how fast the models would have, and how far the models have come. And we're here right now, yeah.
So being in the user experience research, are you capturing on any of the emotional aspects of the users and how they actually impact the usage? And do you think the AI platforms are going to adapt to those? So people are, so they have like high degree of ego versus, people who love to share. Some people don't like to share, as you know, and how the systems are going to adapt. So are you capturing any of the emotional aspects? And that's one question. My second question is copyright.
Let's let him get to that one. And then
Okay.
So with capturing emotion, with the tools that we have available to us, as I said, that we just read out the results of a pretty large survey that has been going on for 2 to 3 weeks, right? In that we capture satisfaction and also open text responses, right? The other good thing about our team is, as I said, I'm leading up an efforts on metrics, analytics, and measurement. But we have qualitative people. Noah just finished a bunch of studies around AI adoption itself, usage and non-usage as well. And bundled in that is obviously fears, right? Job security, insecurity, right? As I've suggested, some of developers, some of them are curmudgeonly, right? Ask them to change a tool, something that they've honed and used over the years, right? So there's some amount of work here to be done, right? in overcoming some of these things. And I don't think we've done a good job at that right now. As I started this talk at the very beginning, it's basically a series of headlines of these CEOs saying like, adopt AI or ... right? So the picture is obviously a lot more complex, a lot more nuanced, a lot bigger than what is being suggested by these headlines. To the example that you give, like different personality types and and how they would interact with AI, I think that's still a new area, right? Like that's unfurling, right? And my point in this talk is that this is socio-technical, right? That this is HCI, it is in the interaction, A pencil or a pen is a tool to write only insofar as the being that's doing the writing can recognize it as a writing instrument. Some other being might think that it's a weapon or, a stick to be thrown, right? In other words, this field has a long history, right, in environmental psychology as well, and its relation to emotions as well. And I think we would benefit from going back there, I would say.
My second question is about restitution, copyright, if you will. In organizations, usually programmers are acknowledged based on how good their code is and so forth, and they get acknowledged and referred and so forth. So how do you see agentic AI? Who's going to get the credit? Who's going to be acknowledged and so forth?
I do not have an answer for you there. I mean, all of us working in corporations that are not working for yourself, all IP is owned by the corporation, right? As long as it's written on their machine, right? So I think therein lies your answer, right? But if you were working for yourself and you were using AI, I think that's a different question. There's definitely, developments in that area, right? China has these open source models, right? Which may get more popular, right, in the near future.
I have another question. Curious about what kind of decisions you guys are trying to influence. So I think you mentioned you're doing quantitative metrics and you're doing qualitative research. And then you mentioned like meaningful frictions. This seemed to be like a principle you want to design for deeper integration. So I wonder, what are some of the outcomes regarding the current developer process, the tooling, or the culture they operate in? What are some of the targets you guys are trying to change?
I'll caveat by saying that each company is different, company culture is different, and even within a company like Google, it's a huge company, right? And people who apply for a job like, what is it like in cloud? I could not tell you, right? Because I exist in this sort of like little corner of the world within a larger company with 250,000 employees, right? I lost your question.
So I was asking what kind of outcomes, whether it's, are you going to change certain developer tooling, infrastructure, or process they work, or maybe some of the collaboration culture? What are some of the levers you will be able to influence?
Noah kind of intimated towards that. I think we are in a let 1,000 flowers bloom phase, right? There's a lot, as I've suggested, there's a lot of experiment. The UX team is being encouraged to commit code like who? But there is a need to understand what is impactful and what is good and contributes versus not, right? And I think we don't know that yet, and that's where a lot of the effort is going. So there's a lot of experiments and efforts going on across the team. How do we judge, right? That's one fundamental question. And that's where the sort of metrics comes in. I have to say, it's not all bad, right? Like Brewster, intimated. we're being encouraged, right? In some ways, I don't know if I still have a blank check on tokens, but maybe not. But I'm encouraged to use as much as possible, right? And in fact, even being encouraged to use external models as well, not just the internal ones, to understand how they differ.
Just a few things like from the talk today is just swirling around in my head from, are we measuring just the things that are easy to measure, to the idea of, to the assumptions of like where the thinking is happening. When you map out and try to think about like what it is that you can try to pay attention to get your signals, maybe some part of it could be the pattern of communication between this employee and the next employee, and when they talk to the AI, and what is that quality of that conversation? What is it? What is it asking? What are they getting back? And so that it's a what is the state of that network over time, and how does it progress?
Right. I would say that right now, at least based on my observation, the interaction with AI is still individual. You may hand off output generated, right? But we're not having like multiple people or a team engaging with like one agent or one model just yet. Or at least I haven't observed that. Maybe I might be corrected. It's still very much, this is a wrong assumption, right? Because we work socially, we work in teams, right? This model assumes an individual working with one agent, right? So, I think that will change and has to change, right, eventually.
So I can hear in your answers a lot, just a richness of experience that I want to expose as much as possible to these people, because we, wonder what it's like to be a UX researcher in a developer community. So that's one question is your day-to-day thing. Are you generating new tools for the tool developers? Are you designing UXs, or is it all evaluative and looking at what exists and how people are, how their practice is? And I have one more question after that.
No, you can back me up on this, but I will start off by saying that our role and standing in the team, of which there are 300 engineers, and we are just 12 or 15 UXers, right? Our role in the team has been hard-won, right? We get no respect, if you will, right? Especially if you think about UXers committing code, right?
For sure.
That's still a bridge that we're still crossing.
They're
right?
professionals, right?
We have a set of UX engineers on our team, and they are prototyping, and AI has enabled that quite a bit. We have a design manager on the team who is cosplaying as a data scientist now, right, because of AI. And I have to say he's gotten very far, and it's pretty impressive, right, what he's done. But could he explain? Not so much, right? Some of the calculations and metrics he's generating. This is what I like to say to newcomers on the team. When we had newcomers, right, it would be, there's never a dull day, right? I'm learning something every day, literally, right? And in areas of the world that, I was a theater kid, right? I never expected to be trying to understand drivers, right? What were we doing today? We're trying to get to the bottom of flakes. And what is a flake? In a large platform, in a machine. Flake.
What's a
flake? When something flakes.
Oh, flake.
Indeterminate test output. Passes one time, fails the next, right? Is it a ghost in the machine? But it's hard in a large system.
Okay. And we aren't going to go on all night. I just want to ask one last question for me, and unless there's somebody else that needs to ask something. But, I grew up in a world where we were making small talk and we were making interlaced with the loops, and we were making symbolics, all these wild things that turned into the IDEs of today with all these tools to visualize and debug and find things and, structured editor, all that stuff. Do you see the tools of the future as rich and empowering as the IDEs that we have? Can we see a sea change of that sort where the developers are kind of feel like they are on the spaceship with all the controls at their fingertips, like they like to have in a new and more powerful way? And how does that feel to you?
I mean, don't let an Emacs user hear that. I mean, this is where we are, right? It's just the curiosity is we've chosen a chat interface or a text box as the main mode of interaction with this like super sophisticated large language model on the back end. Why we arrived at that, I don't know. But on the other extreme, we have humanoids, right? Which is another obsession that I don't understand why we need to chase that particular form factor of interaction with technology. I think currently the interaction model is very limiting, right? It can be a lot more expressive. It can be a lot more illustrative, right? Graphical, if you will, right? But we're not there yet.
Yeah, that's very exciting to me because I grew up learning about the interlaced D with loops, where the programs that came out of it, even though the syntax was exactly the same as other object-oriented languages, was so much more balanced because we had a visualization that was driving the way we were thinking about our architectures as we were developing. And I don't see anybody working on that kind of stuff today. But I don't need to go on and on. It's fantastic to have you here. Very exciting to hear about that there's 12 actual UX people embedded in such a team. And thank you for giving us a little bit of a picture into that, and also some of the broader things that you're thinking about as you're thinking about your projects and your field, and going to Kai and everything. And so with that, we have another Googler coming next week, next month, that's going to be talking about health, UX and health. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And as I said, takes a village.